2 a.m. A female student staggered across the path leading to her dormitory, the last person to walk beside her, a quiet male student whose name few knew. From that moment on, she was never seen again. Kristin Smart, 19 years old, was a freshman at Cal Poly University, California. Standing 6 feet 1 inch, she was a swimmer, loved broadcasting, and dreamed of working in the media industry. Kristin had a bright smile, an independent personality. She often wrote letters to her mother, telling them about her first time away from home as a student. That night, May 25, 1996, Kristin went to a small party near her dormitory. She had no wallet, no phone, and was wearing only a black crop top. When the party ended, she left with 3 people, but 2 of them parted ways. The last person to walk beside her was Paul Flores, another freshman who was once called Creepy Paul by his friends. It was late spring in San Luis Obispo. The weather was clear, and students were busy preparing for summer vacation. But after that night, no one saw Kristin again. No unusual noises, no obvious traces, and no goodbyes. There was only one strange feeling that permeated the campus, as if someone had disappeared right before everyone's eyes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the entire development of the case and the nearly 30-year journey to find justice for Kristin Smart. On the evening of May 24, 1996, Cal Poly students were preparing to enter summer vacation after final exams. Kristin Smart, on a whim, decided to attend a student party off campus. She did not go with her close friends, nor did she notify anyone in advance. The small party, held at a rented house, was attended by mostly freshman students, most of whom did not know Kristin. At the party, Kristin was seen in a state of not being fully sober. Some said she appeared to have been drinking, although no one actually saw her holding a glass. Some students said Kristin was lying on the front lawn while the party was still in progress. It was at this time that Paul Flores appeared. Flores, also a freshman at the time, had been in Kristin's gym class. He offered to walk her home. At the same time, 2 other students, a man and a woman, happened to leave the party and join the couple. However, when they were only a few dozen meters from the dormitory, the 2 friends split up and went in different directions. At that point, according to later testimony, Paul said he would take Kristin to the door of the dormitory. That was the last time Kristin was seen. The next morning, Kristin's roommates realized she had not returned all night. Her bed was not made. Her phone and personal belongings were still there. Kristin also missed her morning job, something she rarely did. The day passed in silence. It was not until Sunday afternoon that she was reported missing to campus security. Over the next week, the pieces began to come together. One friend said she had seen Kristin appear unsteady on her feet when she left the party. Another remembered Paul Flores having a bruise around his eye in the days that followed. But when questioned, he gave conflicting reasons. No one witnessed any violence, no unusual noises. But the act of walking with an unconscious girl back to the dormitory in the middle of the night was enough to make many people feel uncomfortable. And those feelings of insecurity, however vague, were also warning signs that something was wrong. Unfortunately, by the time suspicions began to appear, Kristin had already disappeared for many days, and the first traces of the truth had already passed with time. On Saturday morning, Muir Hall was bustling with students preparing for the weekend, but Kristin Smart's room was unusually quiet. Her bed was made as if it had never been used. On the table, her wallet, keys, and phone were untouched. There was no sign that she had returned during the night. Her roommates initially assumed that Kristin might have slept over at someone's house after the party. But as the day went by without her, the unease turned into outright worry. Kristin left no notes, did not contact family or friends, and most importantly, she was absent from her morning shift, which had never happened before. By Sunday evening, word began to spread among the students in the dorm. Several people claimed to have seen Kristin at an off-campus party, and some remembered her leaving with Paul Flores, a face she barely knew but who had been in her gym class. The fragments of memory suddenly pieced together a disturbing picture. A girl who disappeared after leaving with someone almost no one really knew. On Monday morning, after more than 48 hours without a trace, the school sent out an official missing student notice. California Polytechnic security officers conducted searches around campus and dorms, but found nothing out of the ordinary. Local police were called in only later, when the situation began to spiral out of control. When they arrived, they found it wasn't the disturbance. It was the eerie silence. No signs of haste, no disturbance, no words left behind. Everything was too neat, as if Kristin had never been in that room that night. In the following days, police combed through cameras around campus, but at the time, surveillance was spotty. They contacted Kristin's family and got a clear answer. She had never returned. There were no concrete clues, but investigators quickly realized that this was more than just a student sleeping over at a friend's house. This was an unusual absence, a cold void that hinted at something more sinister lurking behind the placid facade of a prestigious university. When investigators entered Kristin Smart's dorm room, they found nothing unusual, and that was the most unusual thing. There was no blood, no signs of a struggle, no missing items. Everything was eerily quiet, as if she had never returned. With no obvious clues at the scene, the police turned their attention to the people involved. First and foremost, Paul Flores. In his room, police dogs reacted strongly around his bed. Although there was no body, the biological scent lingered enough to get the experts' attention. The fact that Paul had changed his mattress just days after his disappearance added to the suspicions. Some items were taken for analysis, but time had worn away most of the evidence. There was no sign of life or death, nor any obvious physical evidence. But it was the extreme silence, the unexplained behavior, that opened up an unexpected line of investigation. And from there, a decades-long search officially began. From the very beginning, Paul Flores quickly became the most interested name. He was the last person seen with Kristin Smart on the night she disappeared, and the only link between her and the world after that fateful party. Just a few days after the disappearance, the police approached Paul. During the first interview, he remained cautious but cooperative, saying that he had walked Kristin to the bottom of the dormitory stairs and then returned to his bedroom. However, this story gradually revealed weaknesses when compared with the statements of other students. In particular, Paul could not give a consistent reason for the bruise around his eye that appeared soon after that night, initially saying it was from basketball, then saying, "I don't remember." Such small inconsistencies, according to investigators, are sometimes the clearest signs of a lie. The investigation was expanded with the consent of the victim's family. Police interviewed classmates, teachers, and checked personal contacts, and gradually gathered a negative description of Paul: withdrawn, unsociable, and having made female friends uncomfortable with his prying eyes. But it was just a feeling, not enough evidence to convict. Months and years passed. No body, no crime scene, no direct witnesses. The investigation was at a standstill. Although suspicion always pointed to Paul Flores, the police could not make an arrest without a significant breakthrough. But Kristin's family fought on. Her mother, Denise Smart, became a persistent voice in the case, sending letters, speaking to the media, and insisting that silence was not the end. The turning point came from an unexpected source: a podcast. In 2019, Chris Lambert's Your Own Backyard gained widespread attention. By re-interviewing old witnesses, reconstructing the timeline, and collecting overlooked details, the podcast rekindled public interest. Thanks to this viral effect, some previously silent people began to speak out. One woman said that Paul once told her a chilling sentence: "I took a girl away and never let her come back." Based on the new statements, the police officially restarted the investigation. They used ground-penetrating radar technology to check the area of Paul's parents' house in the city of Arroyo Grande. Here they discovered that the soil under the concrete floor had signs of being dug up. Although no remains were found, enough biological samples were collected to confirm that the place was likely to have held a human body. In April 2021, after 25 years of waiting, Paul Flores was arrested on suspicion of murdering Kristin Smart. His father, Ruben Flores, was also arrested on suspicion of aiding and abetting the body's concealment. Both were arrested at their homes. The news was an immediate shock, not only because of the length of time, but also because a new generation of Cal Poly students now knew that the case had never been closed. Prosecutors focused on Paul's unusual behavior and conflicting testimony, combined with new witnesses and scientific evidence from the search. They argued that although no body was found, the logic of the concealment, the biological reactions at the scene, and the indirect admissions painted a picture of a well-covered crime. The entire case was turned over to the courts in mid-2022. Nearly 3 decades after that fateful night, Paul Flores' name is finally out of the court, and the longest investigation in San Luis Obispo history finally comes to light. Paul Flores' trial officially began in mid-2022 in Monterey County Courthouse, a venue chosen to ensure fairness and avoid the influence of nearly 30 years of public opinion. Every move in the courtroom was closely followed by the press. The jury was carefully selected amid a sea of information and never-ending emotions. From the very beginning, the prosecutors presented a series of sharp arguments, focusing on the deliberate concealment and the consistency of the unusual signs. They did not promise to provide all the answers, but they were committed to connecting the dots, from the mattress change the night after the disappearance, to Paul's changing statements, to his cold demeanor over the years. A notable highlight during the trial was the appearance of a special witness, an old acquaintance of Paul's from college. She recounted a conversation she would never forget, in which Paul said, "I have a secret I will carry with me for the rest of my life." Though not a confession, the words, in their perfect timing, were the final piece of the puzzle that silenced the courtroom. The defense tried to counter that there was no direct evidence, no forensic evidence to confirm Kristin's death. Absence, they said, was no basis for a conviction, but the prosecution countered forcefully, absence of presence does not mean absence of guilt. And sometimes it's the silence, the smoothness of a narrative, that's the most suspicious. After weeks of deliberations, the jury entered the room. Nearly 3 decades after that fateful night, there were only a few hours left in the courtroom. On October 18th, 2022, they returned. Paul Flores, guilty, no cheers, no tears, just the mother's red eyes and a slight nod, as if she could finally breathe. In March 2023, the sentence was announced. 25 years to life, no chance of parole, no confession, no body. The long string of actions and the deliberate cover-up were enough to make the truth clear. The public received the result with mixed feelings. Some called it delayed justice. Others said Kristin deserved more. But most agreed, there are cases that don't need confessions, just the truth repeated persistently over the years. And in the end, justice still came. Not completely, but enough for everyone to know. Kristin Smart is not forgotten. Kristin Smart was only 19 when she died, at an age when dreams are still unfulfilled and the future is just beginning. The family lost a hopeful child. The friends lost a gentle girl who always brought laughter. But the greatest pain lies in the fact that for many years, no one knew what really happened. No memorial, no proper farewell. An absence that lasted nearly 3 decades, as if time could not heal. This case is not just a personal loss. It leaves a question for the whole society. How could a student disappear right on a university campus without anyone knowing? And why did it take so many years for justice to speak? The first lesson from this story is vigilance. A small decision, like leaving a party alone or trusting someone you don't really know, can sometimes lead to irreversible consequences. No one can control every risk, but the sense of security and the courage to speak up in the face of the unusual can save a life. It is also a testament to the tenacity of justice. Although it took 26 years for a conviction to be handed down, the Kristin Smart case shows that if enough people don't give up, from family to press to investigators, the truth can be revealed, however late. Justice doesn't always come in a timely manner, but if pursued to the end, it will come. And above all, it is a reminder of humanity. Kristin's family never called for revenge, just calmly fought for the truth and a little peace. It is that unassuming persistence that has made their story touch millions of hearts and fueled the belief that even the smallest voice, if persistent enough, can make a difference. Kristin Smart did not return, but her name, her journey, and the love her family showed her will never be forgotten. And the final question for each of us is, if you were in a similar situation, would you have the courage to speak up? Would you be willing to be the person who doesn't let the truth be buried? Because sometimes justice doesn't begin in a court of law. It begins with one person who dares to say, "This can't end like this."